Hi guys!
Hello everyone.
Welcome back to our channel. I'm Megan.
I'm Dwayne.
And we are the Blended Family Marriage Coaches. That's who we are and what we do. If you're new here, welcome back. Today, we're going to cover a topic that, honestly, I don't even know how to say this. This topic is so important in blended families because there's so much opportunity. And we're going to talk about the different conflict within a blended family, which it's everything, right? And how to handle that conflict within a blended family. So stay tuned. We're so excited to talk about fighting and conflict and strife and all those things that are so common in blended families. So for the very best advice in your blended family marriage, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below.
Should be right
there.
Right there.
You guys don't want to miss a single episode, and that will help you guys be notified every time we air one. We talk about everything here. There is no subject left unturned. We talk about the importance of marriage. We talk about boundaries. We talk about intimacy. We talk about the purpose of marriage. There is no topic that we aren't afraid to cover. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell.
Ding dong.
So that way you're notified when a new episode comes out. Okay, so we're going to talk about conflict. We don't have any of that in our life, so
No, never.
we're kind of talking, we're not talking from experience
No,
here.
never.
And if you can't hear the sarcasm in my voice, please know I am usually a very sarcastic person. And we have a ton of conflict and opportunities for conflict in our lives. So in a blended family and in a blended family marriage, the opportunity for conflict is like tenfold than what it is in a traditional marriage. Right?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I would agree. Yep.
So we're going to talk about specifically three different types of three different relationships that it will cause conflict in your blended family marriage. And then we're going to talk about how to handle conflict and examples on how to do that effectively in those three relationships. So the first relationship that has conflict in your blended family marriage is your marriage. Dwayne and I don't have any conflict in our marriage either. So
no, none.
This is all, like I said, this is all textbook. This isn't speaking from experience.
Right. No, we're perfect.
Yes. Yeah. We've never had a fight. We've never had conflict. Dwayne likes to call it heated fellowship.
Right.
But those are the little arguments that we get into. We've had some full-blown fights and arguments in our marriage, and we'll talk about some of the things that cause those. Usually the relationships that cause conflict in a blended family marriage are the relationships that cause the fights in the marriage and the conflict in the marriage. But that is the top relationship that you have to learn to manage conflict, because it's going to happen. So that is the first relationship where you are going to experience conflict in your blended family marriage. The second relationship in your blended family marriage where you're going to experience conflict is with the co-parents.
Right.
Listen, hear me when I say this. Your co-parents, the parents of your children, are going to be a part of your life forever.
Right. It doesn't end when they graduate high school or they turn 18 or 19 or whatever that magic number is. Where they're no longer, in most cases, no longer part of a child custody agreement. They're your kids forever, so you're going to have that conflict the potential conflict with that co-parent for your entire life.
Yeah, like literally, until we all go to heaven, we are going to have to deal with those co-parents. And everybody thinks, oh, they graduated high school, the custody agreement is done, all of that's over. Well, now you look at high school graduation and then maybe college graduation or moving into the dorms for the first time. And then you're looking at weddings and what does that look like in a blended family? And then you're looking at grandbabies and what does that look like in a blended family? So I'm here to tell you that welcome to the real world. These people are going to be a part of your life via your children forever.
Right.
And there is a ton of opportunity for conflict with these co-parents.
Right.
A ton. And then the third relationship that causes conflict in a blended family is the relationship between the non-biological children. Well, let's just say between the children and the parents. Right. Of course, we all have conflict with our own children, but really the biggest conflict is the non-biological children with the step parents.
Right.
And that's the relationship that I'm going to talk about right now, not necessarily the relationship with your own biological children, but the step parent, stepchild relationship and what that looks like. There is conflict there. It might be managed quietly a little bit more than the other two. You're not going to insult your children the same way that you might insult a co-parent. And hopefully that your kids and your stepkids are respectful enough that the conflict is respectful and it's not necessarily what it would look like in a marriage or with a co-parent. Right. So those are the three relationships, honestly, that you have to look at where conflict is kind of inevitable.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I hate to say that because I think that people assume that we should avoid conflict, and maybe to a certain extent we should, but I think managing it is a better word than avoiding it.
Right. Yeah. It's never good to avoid. I think if you've watched our channel at all, we've talked about us, and we know that that when it comes to conflict in me, like I do what I can to avoid the conflict, which isn't the best way of dealing with it. You really need to deal with the conflict.
It's not the healthiest way.
Right.
There are times, pick your battles. There are times when the fight just isn't worth it, and I'm picking my battle to just step away right now. Right. And that in itself is a form of conflict management. But if it's something that the fight is worth it, we always say, remember what you're fighting for, not what you're fighting against. Right. Mm-hmm. So tip number 1, for all of those relationships, remember what you're fighting for. Are you fighting for your marriage? Mm-hmm. Are you fighting for a healthy, nurturing home for your marriage? Are you fighting for your kids? Mm-hmm. Are you fighting a co-parent that you want to be able to have a healthy relationship with so that way your kids can be strong and healthy?
Right.
And we say this all the time. Are you fighting to raise good adults? So that way they understand that they aren't privileged and the world doesn't revolve around them. Like, let's remember what we're fighting for instead of what we're fighting against. Right. And this is an easy trap to fall into when you're arguing with a co-parent, mm-hmm. when you're conflicting with a co-parent is a better word. It is so easy to fall into that trap that you're fighting. It's you against them. Right. That's the way that the custody arrangement is worded. Right. Like, it usually says the defendant and then the plaintiff versus in the middle. Right. Right? That's the way divorce decrees are written. That's the way custody agreements are written. And I hate it because that verbiage doesn't make it appropriate for a co-parent relationship. Right. So if you can keep it what you're fighting for instead of what you're fighting against, that just makes it feel so much less personal. Right. If you're fighting against your ex-spouse instead of fighting with your co-parent to raise good kids, then there's something wrong there. There needs to be this shift in mentality of I am fighting for my kids. I am fighting with my co-parent to raise happy, healthy kids. And that is where I'm going to start this conversation from. And we mentioned earlier that you aren't ever going to end this with your co-parents. And the best way to do that, for example, a wedding. Let's say that you have a wedding coming up. The best way to do that is, how is this going to be for the kids? Right. Everything else doesn't matter. Right. I think that keeping the attitude, whether it be a wedding, baby showers. We got one of those coming up. So whatever the situation is, you really have to remember that what's in the best interest of the child, whatever that is. So at the wedding, as hard as it might be, you might have to, swallow your pride and remember that it's all about the son or daughter. It's not about the relationship that the two of you have. It's really a time for you to, suck it up and make it all about them. All about the child, right? And that's so important. And I think that as long as, for all three of those relationships, as long as you remember that you're fighting for something instead of fighting against something, that changes your perspective and how you can relate to it. Right. The second one is strong communication. When you're in conflict with either of these relationships, whether it be with your spouse, with your co-parents, or with a child, communication is so important. And verbiage, we talked about change the verbiage from fighting against to fighting for. Right. verbiage and communication means the world.
Right.
So we always say when we're handling spouses that are stuck in a rut and can't figure out how to resolve anything and feel like they just keep having the same fight over and over again, one of the things that we say is focus on your feelings. Focus on how you feel, because your spouse, your co-parent, and your children can't argue that. They can't argue your feelings. If you say something, for example, when you don't pick up after yourself, it makes me feel like we live in a very cluttered home and you aren't going to succeed as an adult because you can't manage your own area of responsibility. When you say that to your child, they can't argue that.
Right.
However, when you say to your teenager, you are a slob, you need to pick up after yourself. Right. I can't handle it anymore. Get off of your rear end and go clean your room. When you say that, there's so many rooms for argument there. The teenager could say, I'm not a slob. And maybe that teenager's right in saying that. The teenager can say, I'm too busy. There's so many things that they can say, but when you disarm them by focusing on your feelings,
right.
When you do this, it makes me feel this. So that way they can't come at you with, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make you feel that way. That's an invalid argument because they can't argue that. And it helps you be aware of your feelings. So you might really realize, okay, so this is a very selfish thing that I'm feeling this way, and I need to kind of step back from this. I need to pick my battles here. Whether if you're having some conflict with the co-parent, if you focus on the way that it makes you feel, some of those feelings are okay. Right. But some of those feelings can be very selfish. It makes me feel like you have a better relationship with our son than I do.
Right.
Or it makes me feel like I don't have the authority to do whatever. And in reality, you probably shouldn't. And those are things that it'll help you focus on your own feelings so that before it comes out of your mouth, you can put it through that filter of, okay, so those feelings are true, but they don't necessarily need to be said, and I need to deal with them. It's a selfish heart. Because we have them. I have those selfish feelings. But when you focus on your feelings, it helps you to better be aware of your own thoughts and your own emotions. So that way you can pick your battles healthily. You can figure out, okay, is this me fighting against this person, or is this me fighting for the success of our children? Does that make sense?
It does.
And the third ability to handle conflict in all three of these relationships, and we talk about them all the time. I will link the series to this right now, so that way you guys can check it out after this video. But the third way to handle conflict within these relationships is to stop it in its tracks by setting healthy boundaries.
Right. I knew you were going to say that.
Imagine that. We talk about boundaries.
We talk about boundaries so often because boundaries, you've heard us say that where there's conflict, and that usually means that a boundary has been crossed. Yes. So if you set those healthy boundaries in the very beginning with the children, with a spouse, because I think that even as husband and wife, we still need to have boundaries.
We have some strong boundaries in place, yes, to avoid conflict for that purpose, and to allow us to be able to trust each other better. Sometimes when we say that we have boundaries up, it sounds like we don't trust each other. No, I fully trust that Dwayne is not going to cross some of those barbed wire boundaries, and we've discussed it, and we've discussed how it makes me feel if they are crossed. Right. So yeah, I think that boundaries are vital. And if what I just said didn't make sense to you at all, please check out that series that we did on boundaries. Right. Like I said, I linked it up above, and I will put it in the description box below. Right.
So we also have to have boundaries with the co-parents.
Yes.
And I think really the boundaries with the co-parent is I don't know if you want to say the most important, it's really the most vital. Because there's so many ways that a co-parent can control things that goes inside of your home that they have no business doing. So you really need to set those strong, healthy boundaries so that the co-parent knows where their where that boundary is.
Right. And I wrote about that in my book, Nana's Pearls. It's the second chapter that talks about boundaries. Right. And it talks about how a co-parent just welcomed herself into the home of the family. And yes, that is still the kids' home too. But that doesn't mean that you get to cross that boundary and come into my house. Right. And I recently did a podcast, and the host of the podcast was so gracious to allow me on her show, but she titled it, "What is your ex-wife doing on my couch?" Because that's a boundary that often is crossed, that parents feel like I have every right to my kids' house. I have every right to my kids' bedroom, my kids' life, all of that. But in reality, you don't have any right to my home. That's my home, and you can't cross those boundaries. Am I saying that I would never invite one of our co-parents into our home? No. Am I saying that they can't come in without an invitation? Absolutely. Yeah, that's for sure. And that's one that I have for anybody. Like, if you're not invited into my home, you're not coming into my home. Right. So those are things that really are so important. And boundaries, it's just a perimeter marker that allows people to know, okay, whoa, play by the rules or you're not going to play at all. And like Dwayne said, the quote that we use is, where there is conflict, oftentimes it's due to a lack of boundaries. Right. So I'm not going to repeat what we've already taught on boundaries. And I will link I will link that series down below in the comments. I will also link that podcast if you'd like to check that out. I had a lot of fun with Jennifer talking about things like boundaries and the relationships with blended families and what that looks like. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. If this was helpful to you at all, will you let us know in the comments what your thoughts are? We love to hear from you guys. You guys can follow us on all of the social medias. I have that linked below as well. We are most active on Facebook or Instagram, so check us out there. And if you like this video, don't forget to, like this video, subscribe to our channel.
Ding dong.
Subscribe to our channel by pushing the button below.
The button, subscribe right here.
And ring the bell.
Ding dong.
So that way you don't miss a single episode. Thank you guys. We will see you next Tuesday. Have a good night. Bye. Bye.